Well, good morning, everybody. General session's running a little bit long, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got basically 45 minutes to go through about 2 hours worth of material, so we're going to go fast and furious and kick this thing off. My name is Robert Myles. I'm the National Practice Manager for State and Local Government for Symantec Corporation. I cover North America, and my role within that organization is to be a strategist for state and local government agencies that are looking to implement cybersecurity practices. I've been in and around IT for a little over 28 years, so I was a former CISO for 15 years before joining Symantec. And so for those that are in the crowd that have been CISOs, the scars do go away after a while and the knobs all wear off your head. The information we're going to go through came from our 2016 Internet Security Threat Report. Symantec publishes this on an annual basis. This is report number 21. We pulled data from 157 different countries and territories. We have 63.8 million attack sensors that are distributed throughout the globe that collates that information into our SOC, and then that information rolls up into our Internet Security Threat Report. Does anybody here work for a government agency? So if you want to take a look, this is the government report. Public sector administration ranks 4th when looking at the number of incidents, and 28 million identities were exposed in the public sector environment. Big one down there at the bottom, most common type of attack seen by all sensors in government, 98% related to attacks in web servers. So how do we get there? Why is it today that being hacked is the new norm? What's changed in our environment? Little event happened in 2007. Anybody remember what that was? Steve Jobs launched the iPhone 3G. Put a browser in everybody's hand. And that connection back into social media started this explosion of people getting into the internet and driving internet practices. Anybody still have a MySpace account? No? No rockers in the group? That evolved into what we call social conversations. So you have Yammer and Twitter at work, you have Facebook at home, maybe you use LinkedIn professionally, and those conversations have evolved to the point to now where this is a small sampling of public sector companies that you can go out and interact with on a social basis. My favorite one's a Quaker Oats guy up there in the corner. So you can go to Quaker Oats, tell them what your favorite brand of hot oatmeal is, and they use that in marketing. So if you can't tell what's being sold on the internet, turn the camera on your phone around, take a picture of yourself, because that's what's being sold. The growth that we're seeing in that market is the other piece that we really kind of address. So everybody remember AOL, you've got mail? It took them 9 years to get to 1 million users. Draw something that came out 2 years ago. It's like a video picture hangman. You have it on your phone, a friend has it on theirs. You draw a picture and they try to guess what it is. That was 9 days to get to 1 million users. Our current sitting president opened up a Twitter account and within 9 hours had 1.2 million followers. So you see the geometric growth in that environment has driven the way we interact to the point to where now this is your consumer, this is your constituent view of data in the world. I no longer sit at a keyboard or a tablet or a workstation. I pound my finger on a pane of glass. I use my Google Foo, and it's strong, and I get access to data. And in that data environment, we're seeing this growth continue to expand. So anybody here get a 62% raise last year? No. Unstructured data grew at a 62% rate. What is unstructured data? That's all the stuff that doesn't fit nicely into a database table. So last name goes in the last name field, first name goes in the first name field. That's table data. All the other stuff like submitted resumes that get sent in, scanned documents, photographs, video recordings, dash cams from police departments, all of that stuff is the unstructured data. And at the top, if you look at back there in 2010, we were at 1.2 zettabytes of data. That's a pretty astonishing figure, but the real key point of that is 90% of that data was created between the year 2009 and 2010. That's where that exponential growth is coming in. And we're at past 2015, so we're above 8 zettabytes of data right now. So what does that mean? How big is 8 zettabytes of data? Well, if we take a single grain of rice, and that represents a byte of data in the environment, a single grain of rice, and we start looking at what a zettabyte is, we have filled the Pacific Ocean 8 times in rice. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of things that we have the potential to lose information on. Little graphic up here was drawn in 1997. Why is that date important? Well, HIPAA was written in 1996. HIPAA is the law that basically says nothing about me without me in healthcare. This was a single patient interaction in 1997. And everybody in the room that's been a patient, is a patient, is going to be a patient, raise your hand. If you're not raising your hand, you're asleep or dead, and you were a patient. So this is the Me Too event of this process. This is that same chart in 2013. Same patient interaction, but we have exponentially increased the number of touch points into your data by 200%. And also, by the way, we've also increased the number of times that your data could be exploited or vulnerable to attacks. So the threat landscape has changed. Started out being that disaffected guy sitting in his mom's basement drinking Mountain Dew and eating Skittles, and he was going to hack the world because that was his way of getting back at people. Maybe he was bullied in school. We don't know, but it's evolved into cybercrime, espionage, and cyber warfare. What does that mean to us? Anybody remember Stuxnet? That was a little tiny virus that got inserted into a centrifuge program. And oh, by the way, it was an air gap system, which meant it had no connectivity to the internet. Somebody used one of these little gems and plugged it in and took the system down. 2012, we had a large number of defense contractors that had their databases hacked, not the defense agencies, the contractors. And 6 months later, we end up with a copy of the F-35 strike fighter sitting in the streets of Beijing, China. Not a serendipitous moment when two people had a great idea and built the same thing at the same time. They stole the plans and built the jet. Used to be that one guy that was your hacker. Not anymore. Now we actually see teams of hackers. Director Comey, the director of the FBI, came out 2 years ago on 60 Minutes and said there's two types of companies left in the US today. Those that have been hacked by the Chinese and know it, and those that have been hacked by the Chinese and don't know it. So which one is your organization? Because they have a recon team, and the recon team says, let's go out on the internet, we'll look for all the devices that are running Windows 98 or Windows NT. And they say, we know these existing vulnerabilities were on that platform. They hand it off to an incursion team. The incursion team says, let's go see if the vulnerabilities are still there. And they find the vulnerabilities, and they turn that over to a discovery team. The discovery team says, using those vulnerabilities, we gain access to the system, and we find out what's inside that system. See if there's anything juicy we want to get a hold of. And when they do, they hand it off to a capture team. The capture team packages it up, gets it ready for exfiltration, makes sure that it's good to go, and then they hand it off to the exfiltration team. And what you need to remember is when the recon team gets done with Windows NT or 98, they go on to Mac OS, or they go on to Linux, or they go on to Red Hat, or they go on to, they don't stop. It's a continuous process for them. It's a little bit like playing a football game where you've got one person on your team and they've got 25 on theirs. In that environment, who do you think wins? It's not that they're that good, it's that they're that persistent and they're that involved in the process. You start looking at the stats that come out of this, build this out, organizations, large organizations, are having 25 or more incidents a month. Now that's not mainly a breach, but it's an incident. Maybe it's a web-based defacement. Maybe it's a phishing attack. This, I think, though, is the most telling statistic of all. The number of days a hacker is inside a system before they are reported on by a third party and notify the organization. Because most of the time, organizations don't detect hacks on their own. Anybody in here have a password policy? Got to reset your password every 30, 60, 90 days, right? So if these guys are sitting inside your system for 243 days, they've obviously figured out how to use the tools that you use inside your own organization to get notified that it's time for them to change their password, and they do. 245 million data records breached in the first 6 months of 2015. That's bad. The thing that's really bad is if you look down there on the bottom, only 4% of those are what you would call a secured breach. That meant that it actually used encryption on the data at rest. 4%. Encryption's been around since the time they were wrapping goat skins around a stick and Caesar was sending messages back and forth between his troops. It's not new technology. It's not being used. Start looking at password hacks that are going on. They're pretty bad. Anthem, that was a big one. Why is Anthem important? Well, if you happen to be a government contractor and you work inside the Capital Beltway, you had Blue Cross and Blue Shield as your insurance company, which is a subsidiary of Anthem. Hacker sitting inside United Airlines for a year. Why? They like frequent flyer miles? No. They're building profiles. So if they can track where a government worker, who they now have information on because they got their insurance information, is traveling on a regular basis, they can start to build a profile. OPM. Anybody in here have a security clearance in there? I do. I've had one since 1980. The last form that I submitted to OPM had 14 people on it. So if you extrapolate that out conservatively by a figure of 10, that's 220 million people affected, not just the 22. A little report came out from a company called the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, and they said between 2005 and 2013, 930 million data records breached. Verizon came out that same year and said if they had done one simple thing, 80% of those breaches would have been stopped. Again, tool sets not being used. That tool is multi-factor authentication. Because these are not disaffected employees inside the organization leaking data, these are remote hacks from a country outside the US that are coming in social engineering, gaining access to a system, and they're remotely hacking that company. IoT. Bonus points. Anybody tell me when the term IoT was coined? Any guesses? 1998. So it's not a new problem. Two very diverse objects on the screen up here. What do they have in common? They both talk to the internet. They put that Nest thermostat in the research lab and they monitored it for 30 days, and in 30 days it uploaded 32 megs of data to Google. It's a thermostat. 32 megs of data. What kind of data is it? Well, it's the size of the home, who the homeowner is, what the contractor is that brings the heating and cooling into the home, what kind of device heats and cools the home, and more importantly, when the homeowner's there and when they're gone. Because that thermostat says when you leave the house, if you're living in a cold climate, it shuts the heat off and the temperature in the house goes down. Device on the right, GE or Rolls-Royce jet engine, I don't care which manufacturer it is, they all do the same thing. They have 20 embedded sensors inside of there. It generates 500 gigs of data a day. And that data gets fed out through a black box in the cockpit, through the internet, to the manufacturer, so that if there's a problem with the jet in mid-flight, the engine's throwing a little vibration, maybe its fuel consumption is off, maybe it's too much air, too much fuel. When the jet lands, they can fix that problem. And if they need to, take it out of service, replace the jet, put a new one on. I could have put this up there. Anybody seen these in public sector? Or how about this? That's a taser with a camera embedded in it. Each one of these devices has the same characteristic. They connect to a computer, and the computer communicates to the internet. If I can affect the computer that this connects to, I can affect how that device operates. I've talked to every body camera manufacturer out there and asked them what kind of encryption protocols and security tools they use in their devices. They all say, well, we have a proprietary operating system, which means there's no security. Internet of Things, yeah. Biggest lie in the room, I guarantee everybody in this room has done it. I have fully read and understand the attached end user license agreement. So malware, remember that 1-on-25 football game? 2009, 2 million pieces of malware. In 2015, it went to 430 million pieces of malware. That's 1,179,000 pieces of malware generated each and every day. 0 days. Anybody have a patching system? Pretty good on that? You think you're all right, doing okay? Well, let's take a look at that. So 0 days, pretty consistently up through 2013, and then 2014, and then last year, 1 per week. So even if you had the best patching system in the world, 54 times last year you were vulnerable. You were unpatched. Anybody recognize these products? These are the top ones out there. And the interesting thing that we saw is that when hackers were using exploit kits to get into these, and the company released a patch, within 5 days, the hackers had incorporated the patch into their exploit kit. kind of a professional thing, right? Look at targeted attacks out there. So the email campaigns that we see, the number of attacks are going down. In other words, it used to be you sent out an email to 6 million of your closest friends. Well, then organizations started whitelisting and blacklisting, and there were spam filters and all that other stuff. So they got a little smarter, and they started doing things like whale phishing and spear phishing instead of just phishing, which meant they would look at a company website, find out who the CEO, CFO, CIO, CMO, who they were, pull their information off social media, and launch the attack specifically at them. And those attacks, last year, 55% increased. The success rate is phenomenal. The size of the business also has a big impact on this. It used to be they were attacking big corporations because they thought that was the easy way to go. Well, what do big corporations have in common? They all have infrastructure and staffing to be able to support a security team. So they found out, they got smart, that if I go after small businesses, they don't have that. So maybe the security person is also the privacy person, is also the finance person, is also the secretary, is also the person that answers the phone. And in that environment, people don't have the infrastructure to maintain security. So you see now that we've got pretty close, most of the breaches are happening in smaller organizations. Breaches, they happen. Last year, 429 million records, and we expect by the time that total is completed and the rest of the companies fess up that, yeah, we were actually hit, it's going to be over 500 million. And last year was what we call the mega breach environment. So 9 breaches last year were over 10 million records exposed in a single environment. Let's talk about vulnerabilities. So hackers have gotten smart. They realize that it's not just enough to spear phish or to do phishing attacks or to try to break in using vulnerabilities. They've actually gone out and purchased malvertising campaigns. They purchased an advertising company. So if you go out to Amazon or Google or someplace, you see all the ads running down the side of the pages. One of those may be the one that's being run by the malvertisers. And they inject malvertising code, advertising code in there, into the websites. And they found that in 2015, about 15% of those had critical vulnerabilities built into them. And so those are good websites with bad advertising. And so does really anybody care about that? Well, yeah, these guys did. And they made the top 10 wanted list for the FBI because they used those malvertising campaigns to attack companies and attack organizations. They used DDoS attacks to gain entry. So anybody here had a DDoS attack? It's not the fact that you get a denial of service attack that's going on. It's what's happening under the covers while the denial of service attack is going on. They're seeing separate code injection going into organizations. They're seeing Trojans and keyloggers being injected. Anybody hear about ransomware? Ransomware is a nasty little device out there, and they basically come in and encrypt your environment. Started back in 2005 time period, and it wasn't really an aggressive, antagonistic campaign at that point. It was kind of the whole misleading application. Yeah, you've got a bad problem with your computer. We can drop our system in there and fix it for you. And then it kind of evolved into the fake antivirus program. Anyone remember those? They came out and you installed the program and it turned out to be malware and it actually infected your computer. It was almost impossible to get off. And now they've gone into not only the crypto locker, but the crypto ransomware. So crypto locker will actually go lock the device down so you can't use the device any longer. Crypto ransomware actually locks down your data, so it encrypts your data. And it started out with just a couple of symmetric key encryptions, but they actually found out what they're doing now is they'll go in and launch the attack using symmetric key, and then they'll go back and re-encrypt using asymmetric key technology, so it makes it even harder to get your data back. And everybody says, do I pay or don't I pay? The real question to me is, what do you call third-party access that's unauthorized to your data? In my language, we call that a breach. So it's not a question of, do I pay these guys off? It's, what am I doing to prevent these guys from breaching my company? If you look over on the right, back in 2005, we actually had crypto ransomware out there. We actually saw it in the wild. The problem was that the hackers didn't have an expedient way of getting money out of the people that are trying to do ransomware. So PayPal and Bitcoin really hadn't been developed at that point. So it kind of faded away, but as you look and see in 2015, it's the top dog in the hunt now. Matter of fact, last year, it jumped to 35%, and recent reports out of the FBI said that we expect to see that go to 300% this year. Little hospital here in the state of California had to pay almost $18,000 in ransomware to get their computer unlocked. And they're equal opportunity offenders. They don't care what operating system you use, what kind of platform you're on. They've got one for you. So starting back in 2005, we had the Windows coders. And then we started in with the Android with the Simp Locker. That was a neat one because it would lock down your phone. It would turn the camera on the phone, take a picture of you, and then embed that into the warning that it was sending you. So it looked like they'd actually hacked your phone. And then we go into Linux and Mac OS. And just to make sure they left no stone unturned, Samsung smart TVs and iWatches. Anybody have one of those Samsung smart TVs? You say, hey, Samsung, turn on TV? No? That's good because that microphone on that TV is on all the time. The trigger event is saying, hey, Samsung, but the microphone's always recording, always listening. So if you have friends that have one of those and they've got it in their bedroom, tell them to take it out. The growth factors we're seeing in this environment, it's a cash cow environment. These guys come in, they encrypt the device, they demand a Bitcoin, and the market value on that's around $625 right now. And then they come back and they unlock the device because that's how they got their cash. You know, if their reputation out there is they come in and lock your device down and then they don't unlock it, the next person's not going to pay. It won't do anything. But if they've got a reputation going along saying, yeah, they unlocked my computer and I got everything back, that's great. I know a police department that's paid this 5 times. They're not fixing the problem. We start looking at the growth in this environment. Look who number 1 is, United States. Why? Why are we 31%? It's an economic factor. Technology and economy. There's cash here in the US to be had for. We start looking at this, it's not just a business problem. This is an everybody problem. As that everybody problem explodes, we start looking at the attack vectors and see what agencies are being targeted. Now, this doesn't say that finance is number 1 or maybe transportation is number 1. Those are economic factors, again. Where we are seeing targeted attacks specifically are in healthcare. Why? It's the value of the data. If I can encrypt a $4 million MRI machine so that it can't work, and that generates $2 million of income or revenue for a hospital on a yearly basis, you think they want it undone? They're going to pay more money. So how does it get in? Well, you have exploit kits, malicious email attachments, and links in email. Wait a minute. Didn't we disable those years ago? Didn't we stop having attachments come in an email? Guess not. Sorry, they're still there. I'm going to build this out real quick. So infected websites, we talked about the malvertising, we talked about the ad campaigns that are going on. They're actually using that in the exploit kits to gain entry into your computer. And oh, by the way, in case anybody's interested, this slide deck is available on the application for the program, and so you will have this. Compromised Word documents. Didn't we disable macros in Word? Wasn't that a problem like 2006, 2007? Well, they're still using it. And these guys are smart because they went back and revisited campaigns. They looked at the advanced persistent threat programs. They looked at other attacks that are going on, and they've adapted their methodologies to fit that. So not only do they be able to look at it as a malvertising campaign for an individual computer, but they're also doing over-the-network attacks. So if they come in an organization, they hit a PC or a laptop, they go longitudinally within the organization looking for other devices. Software as a service-based applications in a cloud environment, yes, you can get cryptoware up there too. Because, you know, really, the cloud, it doesn't exist. It's just somebody else's computer. So how do we fix it? Well, you got to reduce the attack surface. You have to take away the vulnerabilities that are out there. Stop allowing users with privileged right to access to use that as a daily login to get their email. Stop accepting malvertising or malware code inside of email. Stop allowing devices to run zero-day threats. Does everybody in your organization really need to go out and download executables off the internet? Probably not. So look at practices and principles. I'm going to build this out again. So reduce your attack surface. Look at, understand what you've got in your visibility and your traffic. Look and understand where your hardware, your software exists today. Do an inventory on the practice. Block known threats. Blacklist stuff. Shut it off. Turn off ports on the firewall that aren't being used. Identify and block unknown threats. So there you have to get a little creative. You have to start understanding new attack perspectives. You have to look at new technology in advanced threat protection. Disrupt the life cycle. Look at best-of-breed security technologies that are heterogeneous and actually work together. Control with the ability to reprogram in seconds. Look at your backup processes. And if you have a device that gets hit with ransomware, nuke it. Drop that sucker down to bare metal and rebuild it, because you don't know what else is on there. A little bit different perspective of the same thing. So if you're in a network and cloud environment, how do you take care of it? You block unknown traffic, you evaluate your encrypted traffic. Anybody here monitor port 443 for Dropbox? That's a fun one. That's encrypted. Are you using a proxy engine to decrypt your traffic outbound so you understand what's in that traffic? Stop accepting dangerous attachments. There's no reason to have those coming in. From the software as a service environment, block storage or transmission of files containing exploits. Use encryption, use the tool sets that are out there. From the endpoint perspective, make sure that you're running your endpoint protection. Make sure that you don't allow users to turn off things like antivirus because it infringes on their work process. Block the execution of malware. In other words, if you don't see that code running in your environment today, if it hasn't been seen on more than 30 machines and hasn't been inside your organization for more than 2 weeks, don't allow it to run. Those are simple things that you can do within the endpoint protection process. So you're driving down the road, and you see this pop up on your driver's screen, right? No, not today. Well, maybe, if you're driving a Tesla. But it does show up here. It's a consumer fraud piece. And last year, we blocked 100 million of these attacks. So I talked about this a little bit. Cybercrime's kind of being a professional thorn. You know, they're building the patches and zero-day attacks into their code. You know, like I said, zero-day vulnerabilities, why are they there? Because they stockpile them. They hold on to them. They recognize that timing is everything. As I said before, within a week, 5 of the most well-known exploit kits had integrated the patches into their exploits within a week after that had been released. And the attackers are smart. They're not doing this on their computer from their home. They're doing this from a corporate secure environment. They have firewalls and protections. They run security tools. They run their attacks from command and control servers. And, just in case they don't know how to do it, they built installation menus within the code. How do I install my hacking software? Right here. This is the feed that I put in. Here for the server options that I put it in. And as I said, within the command and control environment, they're running these protected behind firewalls. They're taking over a virtual server somewhere and launching the attack from there. All the feeds and bleeds go back to them through a secure tunnel. But the command and control server has all the logs wiped off it, so you really can't tell where the attack came from. And then this guy. Anybody get that call at home? We see your Windows computer has problems. And I love these guys because I run Macs at home. And I'll string them along for 15 or 20 minutes just to mess with them. Tesla Crypt. Now these guys eventually bailed. They eventually got frustrated and they released the decryption keys to the internet. Why they did it, I don't know. Maybe it was a case of the bad conscience catching up with them. But the thing is about this, if you get this on your computer, what do you see down here at the bottom? A message center. I can click on that and get connected to a chat session that'll actually connect me to a help desk person that'll help me take this off my system, help me pay my ransom, help me decrypt my computer. We looked at the Drydex gang. These guys ran spam. They were spam kings, and they did it very, very well. Those are the guys that were doing the targeted attacks. And you look at these peaks and valleys, these are known spam runs per day. Those are the millions of emails being sent per day. But what do you see down here? Anybody know, guess what those are? Weekends. And what's this? That's Christmas. Guess what? They're taking weekends and holidays off. Where else do you see that? Government agencies, right? So if they're working in call centers, if they're writing documentation on how to install and get help desk support, and if they're taking weekends off, it's pretty much a profession. It's not. I'm sorry? I have no idea. That's a good question. So why are our defenses not working? Well, I've already touched on two of them. We're not using the tool sets that are available to us that are out there that can stop some of these attacks from coming in. We're not using multi-factor authentication to keep remote hackers out. We're not using encryption to protect our databases at rest. But the biggest reason? Compliance. And the compliance is not bad. A compliance mindset is. And what do I mean by that? You get one of these regulations that comes out and you say you have to comply with it, PCI, CJIS, HIPAA, whatever it is, and you get your big checklist out. And you get your team. And the team gets together and they say, hey, have we got one of these? Yeah, check that one off. And they keep going through the checklist, and they get to the end of the checklist. What do? They stop. They get out a big cake, they get some Kool-Aid out, and they have a party because they've completed compliance, right? And what they fail to realize is that compliance is not best practices security. Compliance is down here at the bottom of the security curve. You've basically gotten your head above water. You've broken into the barrier of security. You have not gone beyond minimal practices to start. It's a baseline level. We start looking at different regulations that people have to comply with. I mean, if you're a government-based healthcare organization that's attached to a corrections facility, how many of those laws or regulations do you have to comply with? Pretty much almost all of them. And when people start going down that path, they start focusing on, these are just the 13 elements of the CJIS policy, Criminal Justice Information System. By the way, HIPAA, PCI, and CJIS all got their start from FISMA, the Federal Information Security Management Act. And guess which one the police officers get really good? Down here at the bottom two, physical security and personnel security. Because they got the guns and the jails and the locks and the handcuffs and the batons, all those good things that you can secure personnel, but they forget about the other components like media protection. And training to a police officer is how many rounds did I get to put down range this month? Did I do my defensive driving course? They don't think about security awareness training. They don't think about phishing. And when they get in that platform environment of that doing that, that's where they end up. Now this guy had good core security. That's a great Krypton lock. But he forgot about all the peripherals. He forgot about auditing. He forgot about security arrangements. He forgot about the security awareness practices. So all of that said, how do I really defend my organization? How do I get to the point to where I can be mature in that security environment and defend it? This is a very high level track record of how you get to that point. You got to have a single throat to choke. You cannot create security by caveat, by group consensus. It has to be a decision point. You have to have a CISO. Look at policy implementation review. If you go build a house, you don't go down to Home Depot, buy a bunch of lumber, go back and start slapping it together and come out with a $4 million mansion. If you're going to do that, you have to have blueprints. You got to know where the wires are going to go, where the pipes are going to go, how thick the walls got to be, how tall they got to be, where they're going to be placed on the foundation. That's what policies do for a security program. They define the characteristics of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable inside the environment. What tools are run, what your baseline levels are, how you define security. Asset identification, hardware and software. If you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. And software goes across the board. Every piece of software inside the organization, including the copy of QuickBooks that Mary Jane runs for the executive in your department. Because that's software running on your system. Data governance and data classification. Anybody here in IT? What part of data governance are you responsible for? What part of the data do you own inside your department? And the answer is none. You build the systems that the data gets stored on. Data governance belongs to the data owner. So who owns financial data within your organization? The CFO. Who owns the HR data? The HR director. It's not IT. Risk assessment and vulnerability assessment, two completely different animals. A risk assessment says, I have an asset, it sits on this platform, it contains this data, the value to the organization is X, the compensating controls that I put in to protect it are Y, and that gives you an equation, a number. That's your risk assessment score. A vulnerability assessment is a third party or an internal audit department coming back and testing your risk assessment to see if it's actually protecting that data. Training and awareness, if I had only one thing to spend money on for security, I'd spend it on some employee training. Why? Well, if I have 11,000 employees, I either have 11,000 points of vulnerability or I have 11,000 gatekeepers. Because every one of them has a user ID and password, and if they have access and user rights and privileges, that unlocks your encryption. So if you can train them, you can turn them into a gatekeeper. And the good thing is, up to this point, how much money have you spent? Nothing. This is internal resources. It's not till you get to this point till you actually start spending cash. And then you probably already have these tools in-house anyway. You already have a firewall. Go talk to the IT team and see how the firewall is working. Find out what your assessments are. So, risk management, we talked a little bit about this. 5 most important pieces: hardware, software, configuration, vulnerability management, and malware. Now, there's a recent report that came out that said if you do these 5, you'll reduce your exposure by about 80%. That's a pretty good return on investment, wouldn't you say? These are not mine. These come out of SANS. These are the top 5 critical controls from SANS. So, hey, here's a great organization. Let's do what they say. The other component, let's look at frameworks. Anybody here use COBIT, ISO framework, developing security? Here's another one, the Common Security Framework out of NIST. It's not a standard. It's not a control. It's not a checklist. This is a tool that will allow you to assess your organizational abilities and implement practices to inspect, detect, protect, respond, and recover from cyber attacks. And it's pretty cool because if you look here on the right side, we've already got COBIT, ISO, NIST 800 series embedded into the document. So they're using all of the resources that you would have used in a single platform. And it allows you to do a tiered response, so it can tell you where you are and how well you've done. The best thing is, though, it can tell you where you started from. So you do your assessment and say, here's where we are. Our end state is to be here. This is what we need to do to comply with whatever regulations out there. And then it shows you the gaps that you need to address to be able to get to that point. Pretty cool tool, huh? And it's free. Early adopters, financials and utilities, and my company, we use it. We get millions of attacks a day, and the only way we can stay strong in that environment is to make sure that we're doing the best practices out there. Anybody here have cyber insurance? Cyber insurance companies are actually giving a discount to companies that go through, or the organizations that go through and do the NIST cybersecurity framework, because it demonstrates to them due diligence and compliance. Best practices, how to implement unified security. Don't assume that you're not going to hit. It's not a question of have I been hit, it's have I already been hit? Is there something going on inside my organization that hasn't been detected yet? We actually see companies out there today that are operating from an assumption of breach. In other words, we're assuming that we've already been breached. How do we recover? Look at a strong posture. Prepare for the worst. Anybody in here that does not have a cyber breach response plan? If you don't have one, you need one. It's like health insurance and life insurance. You may not ever use it, but you got to have it. Look at all of the components of cyber in a unified security practice. Do the things that you can do, and those things that you can't do, leverage other organizations that are out there. I know the state of California participates in the multi-state ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center. There are data feeds that come out of that if you contact the state, you can get access to those. If you don't have the ability to do incident response, get somebody that can. How fast is your procurement in your organization? Can you buy something at the end of the day? If you put in a purchase order today, can I get it by the end of the day? So if you get hit with a breach, how are you going to get a breach remediation company to come in and help? It's going to take you months of procurement to get somebody in there to help you out. Get a retainer, get them on file, so that you have companies that, when you do get breached, can come in and help you remediate that. Look at threat protection across all the systems, not just endpoints, not just servers, but all of the gateways, all the potential entry points into your system, and include mobile devices, because they have access into systems now. And then I want to talk about a unique organization that Symantec is a part of, and it's called the Cyber Threat Alliance. We've done this because we recognize that cyber threats are everybody's problem. We've done this because we recognize that ransomware is an epidemic. And it takes more than just one company to be able to defend against this. So you see the founding companies that are up there, Intel, Security, Palo Alto, Symantec, and Fortinet, and the contributors that are on there. So what happens in this environment is if we detect a new breach, a new piece of malware, that 179,000 pieces of malware, when those start popping up on our radar, we contact the Cyber Threat Alliance, and that information is shared amongst all the companies that are on there. Yeah, we're all competitors, but unless we collaborate together to put that information out there, it does no good. Because we may be fixing it on our end, but if they're not fixing it on their end, the attacks are still going on. So what that does, it provides deployment of solutions, it provides deployment of threats, it allows collaboration, intelligence research. We have some federally named organizations out there that are helping in this as well. And really what we need to do is kind of rethink the game. We can't look at security as a cost center within our organization. It can't just be that thing over there we spend money on and nobody really understands. I had a CEO one time tell me we had great security, and I said, how do you know that? What metric are you using to determine that? He said, I don't get Viagra ads anymore. Our email servers are always up. They never go down. We must have good security. When you look at data intelligence, it's not what we have, it's what we do with it. How are we sharing that information? How are we collaborating with other state organizations? If you have a ransomware attack in your organization, don't keep it private. Tell other state agencies. Tell them what happened, how it happened, what you did to stop it. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. If it's connected to Wi-Fi, if you've plugged it into an RJ45 jack, if it's in the data center, if it's inside your organization, and I'm talking Fitbits. Fitbits get infected with malware. How does it communicate? It communicates via Bluetooth. How often does it communicate? All the time. If you have a Bluetooth receiver in your organization, somebody walks in with an infected Bluetooth device, guess what? It's an attack vector. Know the risks that are out there. There are tools that are available. We published an Internet Security Threat Report. It's about 180 pages. We do this on an annual basis. Like I said, this report is number 21. We do supplemental reports. This is one that was done specifically on ransomware. These are available free from our website. You have to put your email address inside. I can't get away from that. It's not me, that's marketing. But these are tools that are free. And my recommendation is you go to Verizon, you pull theirs down. You go to Sophos and you pull theirs down. You go to Kaspersky, you pull theirs down. Go to Intel, pull theirs down. Go to Microsoft, pull theirs down, and get ours. And do your own analysis. Review the documentation, find out what applies to your organization, do the correlation effect of understanding what each organization is reporting, and then apply controls to prevent it. There's a security response website that we have access to, and if you're a real Twitter geek like myself, you can sign up for the Threat Intel Twitter feeds, and you'll get those on your phone on a continuous basis. And I finished that's 102 slides. That's a record time. So we've got time for Q&A. If you have any questions, fire away. If you don't want to ask questions right now, you can come talk to me later. I'm here.
Will the slides be available?
The slides are available right now. So if you go to the PSP Forums application, go to this presentation. The slides are available for download right now. Additionally, our Internet Security Threat Report and this ransomware report will be uploaded to the same site, and they'll also be shared on the library from PSP Forums. So if you want those, they're available for download, so that you can get around not having to put your email address in. That's a freebie from me to you. Other questions? My business cards are up here on the table if you want one. In the room with me, there's a couple of folks from Symantec if you want to talk to them. If you're a Symantec customer today, you actually have tools to stop these attacks embedded into your endpoint protection. So if you're getting affected and you don't know what's going on, get a health check done and figure out what's happened. Maybe you don't have the settings set up right, maybe the automatic feeds are not there. But take a look at that because we have tool sets to stop these. No other questions? Come on, there's got to be a question in the room. No?
How about a compliment? I was just fascinated by all the statistics. I just didn't realize how, how much malware is out there, how much is produced daily. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
it's really exploded from a malware and from an antivirus or from a virus perspective. One of our lead agencies, one of our guys in the agency came out a couple of years ago and said antivirus is dead. And he's right. As a standalone tool, it is. Antivirus by itself won't protect your company. You have to use all the tools that are available to you out there. Yes, sir?
In your opinion, in the next, let's say, year's time, what is the next big attack vector that could be exploited?
Internet of Things. So internet-connected devices that are out there are going to lead to the next big attack vector. So you start looking at things like traffic lights in a city, smart garbage cans in a city that send out a report that says, hey, I'm full, come empty me. Those are new attack vectors because they're not building security into them. Yes, sir.
I have, what I want, to your knowledge, on the ransomware, I've noticed I've never received one, unlike you at Max, but my parents, it seems like them and all their friends, they're smart enough to even know that they're older people, it seems like. So, to your knowledge, do you see a trend in that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ransomware groups are out there using social media. They're harvesting information. So if your mom and dad have a Facebook account and they're talking about their grandkids, they're using that information to figure out who they are, where they live, what their favorite color is, what their grandkids' names are. They're using that information to socially engineer and launch the attacks. It's absolutely there.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. Yeah, now our friend got that, now our friend got that. It's like, oh yeah, they know.
Well, thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it. Make sure you do your feedback forms.
I did want to ask you one last question.
Thanks.